Okay, people are starting to come in, Brent.
Okay, come into the class or come in online?
I'm sorry, what?
Into the class, right?
Okay, people are starting to come in, Brent.
Okay.
That was nice.
Come into the class or come in online?
I'm sorry, what?
To the class, right?
Okay, people are starting to come in, Brent.
Okay.
That was nice.
Come into the class or come in online?
I'm sorry, what?
No wonder you didn't have trouble reading.
Where?
I used to work in a brewery. Actually, I helped build the brewery and they offered me a job.
You told me that, yeah.
And I got a job in there and there's like over 800 employees in there. And the canteen women every year,
You told me that.
the butt of the year.
Oh, I love it.
Oh, my gosh.
1981 butt of the year.
How
impressive is that?
One winter in 1981.
But you know, I want a picture.
We just
of
had to
that
hear about the
nineteen
She
1981.
got-
Well, I never thought I was very good. But anyway.
She was even teasing me when I'm in the hospital, but she's like, to the nurses, be careful with that, but in nineteen
It's an
81.
award
I
winning.
love that.
And they're like,
Oh my God.
Hey, before we get started, you went to the plaza
And
for
Lisa,
the parade and
You
Lisa.
I didn't
Or you-
do the
told me to
parade.
do my-
I was
my
exhausted by
place.
that.
Where
But
did
we
you-
were by the fountain.
Where'd you park?
We got so lucky.
That'd be
You know
my
where
worry.
Brush Creek goes through?
Yeah.
It's just a couple blocks. There was a place.
No way.
Right there, you know, on
Ugh.
this side of the creek and not on the
I
side of
tried
the.
to get in my car and just put a sign
just
on my
like
car and
amazing.
drive through it all, but I didn't do that either.
does anybody know what the exact total of the whole country is?
No.
They're saying millions.
There were
They're
2,500.
adding it all together.
Still compiling numbers.
Yeah, that should send us, send.
Well,
It
I
won't.
guess a lot of people had knee problems this week.
And so far, the only issue that's been reported was in, no, I want to say San Francisco, but I may be wrong on that. But after the march sort of ended and the protest ended, there were some people who blocked an intersection and the police just asked them to leave, and they did.
That was it.
So far, now I haven't checked news since I came here about 9 o'clock this morning, but so far that's all that was there. So, yeah,
Tourism.
Yeah, tourism, that's what they said.
we're waiting for Bob to join us.
Right.
Okay.
But I don't want to get up because it hurts.
And I'm calling him, Liz.
Okay, thanks.
I haven't had coffee for a
We went
while.
down to the plaza, but we were showing Lisa with that picture.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah,
it's just this where it just comes and goes.
I'm not good with it.
Yeah, we heard.
But apparently there were 3 or 4 in Johnson County, and there was, I mean, not only Lee Summit, Kansas City, she said there was one in Independence, but it was at Truman in Maine.
No, I was at St. Joseph, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they were all over the place, so, yeah.
I'm always afraid where you're gonna park. I can't walk, a mile.
Where I worked, it's right across from Johnson County Community College, and it was huge.
There was a huge one there. I saw pictures of that one.
Our parking lot. It was really the sweetest thing because people would pull their trucks up and like this one sweet couple, and she was not very able. But he got her out of the car or truck, got her into the back, helped her so she could stand up and wave, and it was just like, it was awesome.
Yeah.
A friend
That's
that was
awesome.
that one.
I told Joy that Dan Margulies, who publishes every morning on something, today there was no words, it was just pictures. Is that yours?
Yeah.
It was just pictures of all the different things, and some of the signs I love. You know, I grew up reciting this life, liberty,
Yeah.
and I mean it, and a whole bunch of, yeah.
So friends, let me, moment of introduction. I'm not sure where Bob is. Actually, no, he's just joining right now. So,
Okay, good.
and we have online with us Joan Israelite, who is a friend of mine. And Joan also knows Bob, and I've encouraged her to come join us today. So, Robert,
Hey, Bob.
Hello there.
Look at the baby.
Hello, Joan.
Hello. I was
Hi.
not going to put my picture up because but anyhow, what the heck? I'd rather see everybody.
You look great.
I think you look good.
But you're kind.
So Joan, this is a Sunday school class at First Christian Church of Independence. This is maybe, Bob, your 32nd, Great Souls and Great Prayers. And we started this in COVID. And just by way of introduction is that Bob, it's about an hour. And I'm going to turn it away to him shortly. And frankly, I don't know who he's presenting today. And that's why I'm always sort of excited to do this, because I learned something that I didn't know. So I'm at home hosting this, and there's a bunch of people at the church in the church library, and we just have a good conversation. So, Bob, it's yours.
All righty. Today we're going to be looking at one of the most enigmatic religious figures in the history of France, for sure, and also in terms of Western Christianity and Judaism. We're dealing with a woman named Simone Weil. That's how you say her name, like Vay, but it looks like Weil or Wheel or Whale, but you say they. Whenever you see somebody presenting on her who says Simone Weil, you know that they've not done their research and that you need to look to another scholar besides them. Simone Weil died at the age of 34, but it's like she was a tsunami of mysticism, social activism, and radical philosophy. She's an individualist who focused on the fate of humanity. She's an idealist. She goes to the mat on everything, beginning basically either from her birth or at least the age of 5. She's an extremist in her activities. And also in her surrender, if you will. That's my word. Not too many scholars use this, but I would use it. Her surrender to mysticism. She has a brilliant mind, but from infancy on, she has a fragile body. She bridges the gap. One scholar says this. I can't remember who said it. Maybe I can't remember who said it, but she bridges the gap between Athens and Jerusalem. I love that. Between philosophy and spirituality that has connections with Judaism and Christianity. Eventually, she gives a harsh critique of both capitalism and communism. She is incredibly encouraging of interfaith dialogue, except for Judaism, for which she has a harsh critique. And this will be the most vexing thing you hear about this. And I have one particular slide at the very end that deals with this question, a persistent question. Is Simone Weil anti-Semitic, or, as one author calls it, a self-exiled Jew? Now, if you know French, you can dig deeper on Simone Weil and have a field day. If you like abstract theology, you will love Simone Weil. If you have questions about or interest in suffering, you will be intrigued by Simone Weil. So let's go to the first real slide, which is you know what? The first slide is a video clip. Do we have that queued up, ready to go?
Well, let's see, Bob.
Because this is called How to Pay Attention to the World, and that paying attention is everything to her. Paying attention is what philosophers do at their most fundamental task. Paying attention is what prayer is all about. Paying attention is what love is about. And to make it real blunt, how many of you in loving relationships have had the question asked of you, are you paying attention to what I just said? And she would reinforce that paying attention is the greatest form, she calls it the greatest form of generosity.
Can you see the slide here?
Now I can see. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, all right.
Here we go.
Attention was, for Simone Weil, an absolutely crucial skill to develop if you were going to live life in a way that wasn't at the mercy of other forces in the world around you. Just learning the proper way to direct your attention. Not only can it change your life, it can change the lives of the people around you, and then with that it can go on to change the world and then the course of human history along with it. Consider for a second just how important the way we pay attention really is. Not only does the quality of the attention that you have dictate every experience that you ever have, but even more important than that, your attention also dictates which experiences are even possible for you to experience. For example, someone invites you out to a get-together with some friends. A social meetup, let's call it. Now, most of the people going to this meetup, you're cool with. But then there's that one guy that's going. And he's a guy that, well, now that you think about it, maybe top 2, top 3 dumbest people you've ever laid eyes upon. He's the absolute worst. You really don't want to go to this thing, but your friend asked you to go, so you go anyway. And when you do, almost like magic, that person is horrible as usual, and you end up having the negative experience that you were expecting to have going into it. Now contrast this situation with some other day of the week, totally different meetup, different people, and this one, at the start of it, you know it's going to be boring. Again, you don't want to go, but this time you decide you're going to channel a little Nietzsche, a little amor fati, accept that which is necessary. This time you're going to go to the meetup, and you're going to just be open to the experience, whatever happens. You do this, and then again, magically, sometimes in a spot like this, you end up surprising yourself. You end up getting something surprisingly useful out of a situation you otherwise thought you'd hate. Simone Weil might want to ask at this point, what was different about these two approaches? And before any of you out there in your open-toed sandals start talking about the power of positive thinking, no. No, nobody willed themselves into being positive in the second meetup. If anything, Simone Weil would say, you did less the second time around. You just decided to remove some of the baggage that you were bringing to the first get-together. No, the big difference really when you think about it was that at the second meetup, you were just more open to a different kind of experience being available to you. In other words, your attention was different. In the second meetup, you were far more prepared to be receptive to an entirely different read on the situation. Kind of embarrassing because of how basic it may seem, but this was a concept that actually hit me pretty hard when I first read Simone Weil years ago. The idea that a different experience of everything you do is available to you right now, all around you, almost like a radio station that's constantly broadcasting a show that you're not currently tuning into, and that at any moment you can tune into that station. You can just choose to be open to a different kind of experience. That's a real possibility. On the other hand, though, you can also choose to just never be open to any experience that you're not arriving at by default. And then you can spend the rest of your life only having your default perception of things and the first thing that bubbles up into your head. That's a real possibility too. There's a sense in which that experience, where you got something profound out of something that otherwise could have been boring, that experience was always possible for you to have. But unless if you were willing to tune into that specific frequency, for all intents and purposes, that experience doesn't exist in your world. And here's the really important part at the deeper levels of her philosophy. That experience was impossible for you to ever receive until you were open to receiving it.
I will give you an example of that when we get to the books portion of this about where you can start reading her books. If we can go to the first slide, we're going to go very fast today. There's a lot here. By the way, you will get a copy of all of these slides if you want them. If you don't want them, let Brent know and say, don't send me those blankety blank slides. But if you do want them, get ready for them. She's born in 1909 on February 3rd. She is the second child of Bernard, whom she called Beatty, B-I-R-I, and Selma. Her name, if you can see it, is Salomea. And her father is an Alsatian. It's the same area that Albert Schweitzer was from, Alsace-Lorraine. He is an Alsatian. And Selma, or Mimi, is a Belgian. Her older brother is quite famous, by the way. Andre Weil was a mathematical prodigy. And you can look him up and see how significant he was in math, in the history of mathematics. While nursing, after her mother suffers appendicitis, Simone Weil becomes sickly and for the rest of her life struggles with poor health. Though her parents are Jewish, she is raised in an agnostic household. We'll get to this a lot in the later portions of this presentation. Her brother Andre teaches her how to read at the age of 5, and they use Greek as a secret language. This is almost like how twins have a secret language, you know. They have a secret language. Neither of her parents speak Greek. By the way, it should be said that there is an interfaith interest in her family of origin, in both of her parents and her brother from the very beginning. Her brother will become very enamored of Hinduism, and she will learn a lot about that religious tradition from him. In 1915, she goes without sugar. This gets down to how serious she is, almost damnably so, about everything in life. She goes without sugar so as to send that sugar to soldiers during World War I. She develops a lifelong phobia, what will become a lifelong phobia of microbes and germs and obsession with cleanliness. In 1960, she goes to a very, very prestigious school, the Lycée Mondaine. She tells her parents in 1919, at the age of 10, that she has become a Bolshevik. She is in solidarity with all the Bolsheviks who were led by Lenin in the revolutionary socialist faction in a couple of previous years before that in 1917. At the age of 14, she commits herself to rigorous fidelity to truth and honesty. She is very, very earnest. She again attends one of the Paris's top schools. At age 15, she graduates with her undergraduate degree, what we would call that, a BA, with highest distinction. In 1925, she embraces once and for all the idea of purity and chastity. Again, this is a person who is 16 years old, and she is so earnest about everything. She studies with a pretty known philosopher, Alain, at the Lycée Henry IV, and classmates call her the Red Virgin because of her commitments and her earnestness. She begins to have migraines in 1930. In 1931, at the age of 22, she attains her doctorate. And she will be first in her class, besting Simone de Beauvoir. Does that name ring a bell to some of you philosophy people? Well, she was connected with the philosophical movement of existentialism and Jean-Paul Sartre. By the way, she came in second to him as well in another school. Simone de Beauvoir was always second. She begins teaching at a secondary school, but she joins in public demonstrations and protest marches for industrial workers, which gets her kicked out of that school as a teacher. She transfers to another school. I don't know how to say that in French, Auxerre School. In 1933, she transfers to yet another school. In 33, she arranges for Trotsky to stay at her parents' apartment in Paris. Trotsky was a leader in the communism movement, although he was opposed to Lenin, and he was on the move always and under threat. It's interesting how he will not cavort with, but have connections with Simone Weil, but also Frida Kahlo in Mexico City, if you remember that. In 1934, she quits school as a teacher and works as a laborer, first in a metalworks factory, then again in Boulogne, and then finally in the Renault factory outside of Paris. She will write The Coming Cold War. She does not know, nor does anybody know, about how nuclear weapons will affect the whole world, but she talks about this coming Cold War. All up to this time, while she's teaching and all that, she is with some of the top thinkers in France. And she's known as a rigorous intellectual. In 1935, she has a vision listening to a procession of people in the streets singing hymns. She has a vision that Christianity is the religion of the poor, or as she says, the religion of slaves. And she has a great identification of that. I'll propose why she has that identification later. In 1936, she goes to Spain to offer her services in the Spanish Civil War, although she had been declared a pacifist for most of her life. She is bearing a weapon when in some of the pictures that we have of her in the Spanish Civil War. But she doesn't stay there long. She steps into burning oil and injures her foot and goes back to rehabilitate herself with her parents. She's clumsy. She's poor sighted. She has this poor health all her life, and that should be remembered as we go along. She's appointed professor of philosophy at the Lycée Saint-Quentin, and she spends a couple of days in Assisi, and this is in Italy, where Saint Francis once prayed and has a profound mystical experience. That's the picture second from the top. She reads the entire Old Testament for the first time. By the way, I would say she doesn't read it very well, nor with discernment, nor with any kind of philosophical sophistication. I don't know why, but she doesn't. She spends 10 days at this Abbey Saint Pierre, Saint Peter in Salome in France, including Holy Week. She has an experience there that will profoundly touch her. And while reciting George Herbert poems, Love the Third or Love Three, she senses Christ taking possession of her. In 39, when Germany invades Czechoslovakia, she abandons pacifism for good and pays her affluent parents for every meal she eats with them, and she goes hungry when she runs out of money. This last picture, go back, Brent, to that last picture on the lower right is of a place called Saint Marcel de Arch, and she will work in the vineyards there, and she's going to meet somebody that'll be very significant for her publishing career after she dies at an early age. All right. In 41, she begins to pray in a disciplined fashion for the first time in her life, and she attempts to pray the Lord's Prayer daily. She meets this Gustave Thibon. We'll see a picture of him later in about publishing, rather. And she meets him, and he gets her connected to these fields, the vineyards you saw on the previous page. She's about working. She thinks that there's a sanctity, there's a profundity about work, and that work, nobody's work, should be disregarded as anything but ultimately significant. If they're a maid, if they're a butler, if they're a peasant, if they're just day laborers, if they're a physicist, it doesn't matter. Everybody's work is sacred. In 42, she writes texts for one of the books that will become very famous in connection with her name, Waiting for God. And in 42, she comes to the United States with her parents, and they get visas. They have to go through Casablanca to get out of the Mediterranean area and make it to the United States. And she resides on Riverside Drive, and she will attend a black church, and also she will attend in the latter part of her stay in the United States. She will attend daily mass at Church of Corpus Christi. And this is where Thomas Merton was baptized 4 years prior. So they have that connection. In 42, she leaves in November and arrives at Liverpool. She wants to get back into the resistance movement. let me tell you just a little bit about France. How many of you have heard of the Vichy government in France? In 1940 to 1944, France was occupied by Nazi Germany. In Vichy, there is a puppet government that collaborates with the Nazis, and the resistance is in opposition to the Vichy government, and she wants to get back into working as a nurse, perhaps. She attempts to convince de Gaulle, who's part of the resistance, to, to parachute a bunch of nurses to serve at the front lines of World War II. De Gaulle, when he reads her suggestion and when he hears about how vociferous she is in her self-righteous presentation about what needs to be done, not only then, but after the war, in terms of reforming all of France and its government, he calls her crazy, and he does not allow her to do any of this idea that she has. In 43, she enters in England, Middlesex Hospital as a result of tuberculosis, malnutrition, and exhaustion. Remember how I said she was so fastidious and stubborn? She wouldn't eat sugar when she was a little kid. She wouldn't eat, by the way, except what soldiers were eating, and she would go without food. Some people wonder if she was anorexic or if she suffered from bulimia. A lot of conjectures about this, but she didn't care about her personal appearance. She didn't care about her hair. She was just rigorously committed to radical social activism. Because of all of her maladies kind of combining, she's transferred to Grosvenor Sanatorium in Kent in April 17. And then on August the 24th, a mere 4 months later, she dies of heart failure due to the complications from tuberculosis and the self-imposed malnutrition. Her funeral is attended by 7 people. She's buried at Beerbrook Cemetery in Ashford there, near where she died, in the Catholic section. All her major writings from her personal notebooks, she entrusts to Gustave Thibon, the picture that you see there at the top right. And all of these are published posthumously. Albert Camus wins the Nobel Prize in 57. And when he gets this news, he goes to Simone Weil's parents' apartment in Paris to ruminate. And because he held her in such high esteem, and knows what she did or tried to do for the cause of freedom and existential integrity, etc., he has a moment where he feels humbled enough he needs to go to that apartment and ruminate. Czesław Miłosz, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1980, in 1958, back then, he translates Weil's selected works into Polish. He had a high esteem of her. In 2010, a film comes out by Julia Hazlitt called An Encounter with Simone Weil. And then in 22, there's a Simone Weil Center for Political Philosophy that's established. So where do we start in terms of books about her? Well, I have not a disclaimer, but a caution. The 2 books that I think really you should read, and I think you should read them now, and what I'm going to say is based on those books and what I've done in terms of research. Later on in this presentation, you'll see I have some caveats. The main caveat is these 2 books, Simone, Gravity and Grace and Waiting for God, are understood by some contemporary scholars just this year, or last year actually, in 2024 and 2025, to have been grossly edited and or rewritten in a way that does not represent truly who Simone Weil was. There's a scholar out of Boston College named Benjamin Braude, It's a very good Jewish name. I'm not sure he's Jewish or not, but he questions how much of these books, these two books on the left, which are the most significant of what she wrote. There's one other one, but these are two of the three biggest ones. And she never got to edit them, by the way. These were given to Gustave Thibon, and he saw to their eventual publication. But one wonders if all of what is in them is really Simone Weil. That's just a cautionary tale. All right. Next slide. But there are also books about her that are very worthy of your attention. The one on the far left is by Gustave Thibon and Perrin, but they have a bias, and these scholars, especially Benjamin Brauda, would say, wait a minute, watch out for that one. That has a bias in it that may not be accurate. The one called Simone Weil, A Life by Simone Petremont, is pretty wonderful, and it would be well worth your time. It's back in 73. That seems old to us, but that is 40 years after she died. The book that I have checked on the bottom by Thomas R. Nevin, Simone Weil, Portrait of a Self-Exiled Jew, is absolutely brilliant. And he brings up many of these questions about her understanding of Judaism, her take on the Torah. She's basically, in terms of her Jewishness, either in denial or has a kind of haunting or unknown distance to what is going on in Europe. If you have one drop of Jewish blood in you, according to Hitler, you're a Jew and you're to be exterminated. You're to be, you're the object of the final solution. How much did she know about the final solution? We have no idea. Nobody's turned up that research. Did she know about the camps? There were rumors all across France about the camps that Jews were sent to. Was she persecuted and lumped into? Yes, she was. But she objected to. She was kind of like, well, I'm not a Jew. I've never been a Jew. Well, and she would object intellectually to the definition, and we'll see that in a quote of hers in just a moment. In 2024, this book of letters that came out, it's on the far right. It is excellent, and you would do well to have that book. I'm sorry the picture is so small. There are print resources. With regard to these contemporary issues of these contradictions in her personality and these conflicts, when you're digging deep in somebody, you figure out nobody's a clean slate. They've got layers to them, right? I've got layers to me. You can see that I've got my Chiefs shirt on, right? Am I divided in my attention? Not too much, except now I brought it up. I'm thinking that we need to get done by 12 noon, right, for the kickoff. But we've got layers to ourselves. I don't know what happened to each of you last night that may affect your engagement or your attention, to use a good word from Simone Weil, that you could give to this. So there's contradictions. That's why I tagged that one at the bottom by Judith Thurman. It is excellent. It is a very good article and really recent. There's another one, which is a book review of a book written in French by Robert, and I'm going to butcher the French pronunciation, Chenavier, on Simone Weil, was she an anti-Semite? And the review is in English, and I have the link there for you. But the book itself, which really is the best source, is in French, and only if you know French can you read it right now. It's not been translated so far as I know. Next slide. How to read Simone Weil. This is really good. On Her Mysticism by Eric Springstead is very good. And these are audio resources. You can listen to them. I've given you the time signature there, 59 minutes. It's pretty long. The Life and Philosophy of Simone Weil by this William Cecil is okay, but I don't recommend it as a first place to start. The BBC for Great Lives, Simone Weil, is pretty good. Next slide. There's video resources, but they're very few and far between, and none that I could find that record her in a video or movie fashion, and you can hear her talk, hear her voice, hear maybe her urgency or her being demure and shy. She apparently was a little bit shy, except when she got into an argument. She was not shy in an argument ever. But both of the last one is a movie and it's available for $3.99. An encounter with Simone Weil that was brought out in 2011. Okay, next one, next slide. Now I'm going to go very quickly. Don't try to read all these. I'm just going to read some of the largest print. There is the quote that I'm going to quote. I'm going to cite. Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Just remember that when somebody who is poor or disheveled or in need or desperate or just acting kind of befuddled, attention sometimes is the best thing that you can give them. It's like a child. Sometimes the child doesn't need a new toy. Maybe they just need you to pay attention to them. All right, next slide. Now here I'm going to quote one philosopher and one great minister. I can, therefore I am is a takeoff on Descartes' seminal cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. How do you know that you're even alive? How do you know that you're a sentient being? Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. William Sloane Coffin, one of my great heroes, said, oh no, not cogito ergo sum, amo ergo sum. I love, therefore I am. And what she said was, I can, therefore I am. If I can act in the world, if I can be active, I know that I'm alive. Next slide. I like this, and this is something for us in these days and times, maybe all of these are. Never react to an evil in such a way as to augment it. Does that ring true? I hope so. Next slide. And this is a little bit hard. The language here in English is a little bit hard to get around, get your mind around, but it really does. I think it'll make eventual sense. The most important part of teaching is to teach what it is to know. That is, if I can teach you how to learn something rather than subject matter and the body of knowledge, if I can teach you curiosity, if I can teach you the kind of capacity for discovery and to know when you see something that's real and say, I know 2 + 2 = 4. But I also know how 2 + 2 = 7. Not in terms of mathematics, but in terms of poetic power and conjoined effect on our community. The four of us right now, Brent and Liz and Joan and I, together aren't just four collections of individuals. We represent histories and communities and connections in the community. And we could put together something, couldn't we, Joan, to raise up a cause, and we would come out with, oh, I hadn't even thought of that idea. Yes. Oh, and that recalls another idea and another. So, but that is where you say the capacity to discover, to be in connection with others in community. What it is to know is what she means by that. Next slide. And then she says about art, which she thinks is a revelation of the holy, by the way. Art is the symbol of the two noblest human efforts to construct and to refrain from destruction. The best example I think I could give you would not be of a French artist, but of a Spanish artist, and say, if you want to understand what that statement means, go look at the painting Guernica by Picasso. Next slide.
Well, actually, Casal's a good example too, Bob.
That would be a good one too. Listen to one of the greatest cellists in the history of cellists. The next slide. I'm going to read this real quick, but during the last quarter of a century, all the authority associated with the function of spiritual guidance has seeped down into the lowest publications. Between a poem by Valéry and an advertisement for a beauty cream promising a rich marriage to anyone who used it, there was at no point a breach of continuity. So as a result of literature's spiritual usurpation, we could say degradation too, a beauty cream advertisement possessed, in the eyes of little village girls, the authority that was formerly attached to the words of priests.
Wow.
So this is how she thinks all the time. All the time. Next. There are some paradoxes. I'm going to just briefly skim over this part to get to the next pieces of what we need to look at. She doesn't practice Judaism. Parents didn't do it, but she's continuously inclined towards things religious and the life of faith, which is where she lands. She's raised in bourgeois luxury and privilege and access, but she identifies with the poor and the suffering. She's a fervent pacifist for over half of her life, but she eventually will go join the Spanish Civil War and then the French resistance in the fight against Nazism. Her literary output her writing was prodigious in a very short period of time, but she was never able to see her major works in print. She had great capacities for understanding political structures to a degree, but she never had a foundational confidence in her own contributions, which is, I think, an accurate assessment because her understanding of politics, I think, finally is very, very lacking. She possessed immense intellectual capacities, but she never understood her self-destructive kind of inclination that her self-imposed malnourishment would lead her to die and that she would impinge upon her effectiveness as an activist and as a writer. She had keen-eyed vision of the profound love of the figure of Christ, but she too much emphasized the suffering aspects of his great struggle. I love the word agon. It's the root for the word agony. And it's an English word, but it really means, in Greek, it means struggle, his great struggle. So the passion is more important than the parables of love that he teach. And she just emphasizes the suffering to a degree that I think is not warranted. Next slide. She has 4 crucial religious experiences. I've already mentioned all of these. She hears these villagers singing hymns, and she comes to the conclusion that Christianity is preeminently the religion of slaves or those who have been persecuted. She and her family are being persecuted beginning before this because Nazism doesn't rear its head in 35. You could say it officially begins in 33 when Hitler is named chancellor. She experiences ecstasy in Assisi, and she has an irresistible impulse to pray, she thinks. During a retreat at this Abbey Saint Pierre, that's Saint Peter, in Salome, which is pictured in the lower right, she will experience pure and perfect joy in the beauty of Gregorian chants. How many of you ever heard Gregorian chants at a monastery or anywhere, maybe in a performance in a concert? It's beautiful. And she notes that the passion of Christ entered my being once and for all. But it is with this hearing of this poem in 38, which I think is at the same time at the latter part of of her 10-day stint. She feels this sense that Christ came down and took possession of her. Now, some facets that are important and about also her impact as a thinker about faith and practitioner of faith, there's four things. Her focus on attention, her openness to God's Spirit, however it may come, the lived integrity of her identification with the poor, and an urgent emphasis on the Lord's Prayer. Now, this is my interpretation. You won't find this gathered in such a way in many books, but um, the pall of suspicion now that is on her major two books, and the next or three slides from now or four slides from now, you'll see one of the other things that causes I'm trying not to critique her negatively, although I will end up giving you some negative critiques of her. Next slide. Whoop. Um, Attention for her means many things, but it's essentially paying attention to see life without in kind of framing of the lenses of history or politics or spirituality or psychology or economics. It's suspending our tendency to conform our experience and thinking to preconceived ideas and ideals, open and receptive and waiting. It's kind of like how we'll watch the Chiefs game for those of us who are going to watch it. Oh, they shouldn't run that play. They should fling it down the field. Come on, do a long ball rather than pounding it into the middle with a run play. Well, wait a minute, just attend to it, wait, be open and receptive, and see what happens. Such attention leads her to an ethical perspective that's based on compassion rather than rules, laws, or rather than assumptions about rights that everybody has as a human being. Seeing people in their particularized, specific human situations and responding with compassion to them becomes the foundation of her ethics. Her attention is also at the core of what she means by love, human and divine, and also the responsiveness of prayer in connection to God. Next slide. She has an openness to God through art, through the texts of the Bible, and particularly she'll read them in the original languages, and through watchful, persistent, urgent, and diligent prayerfulness. Let me do one kind of qualification about Bible. She finally sides with the New Testament as the thing that trumps everything else in the Bible. She doesn't give Judaism or the Torah its integrity of standing on its own. I don't know whether this is the kind of Catholicism that she encounters, which under Pope Pius during the 30s and the 40s would have been, this is pre-Vatican II Catholicism that talks about the perfidy. Do you know that word? The perfidy of the Jews on Good Friday, that they killed Christ. Did she buy into that? I don't know. We don't have anything in her writings that I've read that says that. Her openness to God was founded on her belief that God could and would visit all human beings. It's more of a passive spirituality. It is not for man to seek or even to believe in God. One day or another, God will come to us, to you, to man, to him. Next slide. She talked about the poor and identified with them and their plight, and she walked faithfully what she had taught. In addition to being a teacher for manufacturing workers, she worked herself as a factory worker. She volunteered to serve in a helping capacity in two wars, in the Spanish Civil War, where this is a picture of her shouldering a rifle in the Spanish Civil War, and yet she had been a pacifist. And then also in World War II, she was about defeating the Nazis. She had an urgent emphasis, next slide, on the Lord's Prayer. She began praying it toward the end of her life daily. She came to believe that repeating the Lord's Prayer could bring peace and calm to one's life. There is a prayer, the Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a Savior. That's not the prayer that I'm talking about, but it is a very famous prayer that in the history of Christian spirituality, if you prayed that continuously and could somehow unconsciously pray it, you would be blessed. It's not a superstition, it's a religious practice. She thought you could pray the Lord's Prayer that way and that it could bring peace and calm. I haven't found out if she knew the so-called Jesus prayer yet, but I would not be surprised if she ran across it. But her practice was repeating the Lord's Prayer. 2 years before she died, she began praying this Lord's Prayer every morning, and her hope was to pray it with absolute pure attention. Next slide. But we have this persistent question. Is she anti-Semitic or a self-exiled Jew? Let me talk about the context in which she grew up. She was fully assimilated into the French mainstream of life. She lived a bourgeois life. She was a person of means, her father, a physician, and her mother, a person of culture and esteem. They didn't suffer at that time direct anti-Semitism themselves, she grew up in a kind of agnostic, almost atheistic household. But there had been a few centuries or 2 centuries of anti-Semitism on both the left, the liberals, and also the right, the conservatives in France. She viewed Judaism as an outsider. This is what's his name, Nevin, in that book on her life as a self-exiled Jew. He uses the phrase, she had an unreal historical distance. Kind of like Hitler is going to kill all the Jews. Well, that doesn't mean me, does it? No. Or they're rounding up all the Jews. Well, that has nothing to do with me. I'm not a Jew. I don't practice that. You are really being naive and intentionally belligerently ignorant. She did not consider herself a Jew. These are quotes from her. She was raised without any religious practice by free-thinking parents. She never entered a synagogue. She felt no attachment to Jewish tradition. But I think she was ignorant of both Judaism and the Torah. From what has been written, we think, if it's her words, then she has written some really dastardly things about the Torah and pretty shallow. Have you ever heard that thing about, well, I don't believe in the Old Testament. That's just blood and gore and rules and laws. No, it's not. Have you read the 23rd Psalm? My goodness. Have you read the prophets? Who did Martin Luther King quote from all the time? Isaiah, Amos, Micah. You know, the Hebrew Bible, what we sometimes call the Old Testament, is rich and rich. And by the way, Jesus quotes the Psalms and the Old Testament. He doesn't quote the New Testament. The New Testament is about him, but he is firmly rooted as a Jew. Then she said, by the way, well, how could she get along? She was an intellect, she was superior intellect. And Nevin says she was not accustomed to yield an argument and never inclined to be silent in the midst of one. She loved a good intellectual fight. And she held, this is really regrettable, but she held to a displacement of Judaism by Christianity's authentic spirituality. Did she not know of Martin Buber? Martin Buber she would have known about him. In Germany, at least. He probably came to Paris. Would she not have heard of Abraham Joshua Heschel? I mean, is she not paying attention to Jewish? Had she not heard about the Kabbalah? There's authentic spirituality in Judaism aplenty. But yet she said this. This is in a letter to the Vichy government when they were trying to take away her rights. I regard the statute on Jews as generally absurd and unjust. For how can one believe that a mathematics teacher can harm children learning geometry simply by having had three grandparents who went to synagogue? And then Nevin says about her, she wanted to rescue Jews from Judaism. She also believed she was rescuing them from those who would persecute them as Jews. All of which is to say, with this newfound kind of suspicion about what's the word, Brent, provenance of a text, about its origins and its authenticity, if this proves to be correct, we're in for a new kind of revolution in Simone Weil studies in the next 20 years. Next slide. This is assessments, and I want to give you mine that are inferior to these. These are better, but I just want to give you three. I think her self-starvation was kind of pathological. And she was trying to declare her solidarity with those who were struggling, who were poor, or who were soldiers. Well, contrast with that with Gandhi's fasting. Gandhi always fasted with a focus on a strategy to get something done. She did it as a form, I think, of purification and individual sanctity. Gandhi never did that. I mean, fasting is good for you, but he did it with a strategic political focus, meaning I'm going to stay in this fast until all the Muslims and the Hindus stop killing each other in Calcutta. All right? I'm not going to stop until they stop. He was focused in his strategy. Secondly, she's silent on some things that she should have been vocal about. She was silent on patriarchy. She was very comfortable debating with men all of her life. But some of the things that she said about being passive in the world and not really resisting, well, that could be used to oppress women, huh? Couldn't it? Absolutely. Thirdly, she believed that God retreated from the world after creation. And this leads to a kind of Gnosticism or a kind of deistic. And I don't mean to be throwing these words around. Some people believe that in deism, God set everything up like a clock and set it into motion and then left the building. Y'all work it out. Well, that's a very crude summation and distillation of deism. It's more than that. But she believed that God had retreated from the world. I don't see how she could say that if she's listening to these peasants in procession and she singing a hymn and she understands Christianity as being particularly appropriate for slaves and for the oppressed. How could she say that? But these three quotes I want to highlight Albert Camus. They're all French. The only great spirit of our time, he said. And Andre Gide, I think this is the perfect description of her. She was the patron saint of all outsiders. And then Simone de Beauvoir remembered a great famine had broken out in China, and I was told that when she heard the news, she had wept. These tears compelled my respect much more than her gifts as a philosopher. I envied her for having a heart that could beat right across the world. So with that, we've got about 2 or 3 minutes. Time's yours, as Andy Reid would say. Questions, commentary, whatever you want to say.
Well, Bob, I will just jump in for a minute. This was just excellent. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this, but I do have one question. You referred to the Jesus prayer, and I'm not sure what you mean by that. What was the Jesus prayer?
Sure. I should have printed it out and put it on the slide. The Jesus prayer is a historical, um, repeated prayer that began in oral tradition. Nobody first wrote it down that we can think of. It's probably 5 or 6 or maybe 700 or 800 years old. Some believed it started in Russia. Other people believed it began in some Slavic country. And the literal, I'll dictate the prayer. Jesus Christ, Son of God, no, the Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. That's it. That's the whole prayer. And it's called the Jesus prayer. Do you know the writer? Oh goodness, I'm too full of Simone Weil. J.D. Salinger. He has a short story, the title of which I forget right now, but it's about the Glass family. These are people who appear on like the $64,000 question. They win all the time. They're brilliant. And I think it's in Franny and Zoe, maybe one of the novellas, where one of the people, one of the Glass siblings, goes around saying the Jesus prayer in search for connections and union with God and a sense of peace and calm. It's a long tradition, Joan. It's not, it's practiced in Christian circles. It's practiced in mystic traditions. And it's viewed as if you will say this in whatever language. I said it in English. If you were saying it in French, you'd say it, the translation in French. But it is saying that if you only prayed that the rest of your life, but consistently, you would have a connection and a union with God. That's the Jesus prayer. What I was saying is her version of that was praying the Lord's Prayer.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
And our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, that everybody in Western civilization knows. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Bob, this is Liz. I guess what kept coming to my mind is I'm also amazed at all the stuff I learned today and love it. But what I kept hearing is a description of someone who today we might describe as being somewhere on the autistic spectrum.
Yep.
Does that seem reasonable? Well, I mean,
Yeah, I maybe. The thing is, she could laugh and play with her brother and her parents, and anybody who was as smart as she was, she could engage with them. I
sure.
mean, Simone de Beauvoir knew her. She was odd. She was different. Um, there's a way sometimes to be. Uh, Kids are funky, they're unusual. Sometimes they look weird, and then they get branded. I don't know if she was on the spectrum. There's been no other evidence of facial tics or blurting out things or
No.
repeated physical gestures or I have an autistic nephew, so he is Asperger's. He deals with that in his life. I have a great story to tell you about him, though, if we have time, if people will stay around. A great story. One of the great moments of a trip to Texas I've ever had in my life, and it's because of Lincoln. But to answer your question, yes and no.
I mean, obviously
Um,
they weren't making that diagnosis at that time, and but just the way she pursued some things and they really got stuck in her
yeah,
life in her head
yeah.
and other things not so much. That's
But
just what kept coming to my mind. Yeah.
my nephew Lincoln loved dinosaurs. He doesn't love dinosaurs. He switched his attention to something else. Um, and he'll perseverate, to use that good educational word. He'll just focus on this for a while, and then he switches. She didn't switch. She is in solidarity with soldiers in World War One because the tails are coming back from the trenches. that they are suffering and that they're malnourished. So she gives up sugar and then she wants to send it to them. She has this compassion emphasis in or impetus or she's catalyzed by suffering and she wants to respond. And I think from time to time, some people are just born that way,
Yeah.
whether they're on the spectrum or not. They just, uh, they are. By the way, I mean, too much of that can render you ineffective.
Yes.
You know, if Brent turns into a weeping puddle, I'm going to say, Bubba, get up, let's go. You got an Inglewood
Well,
Theater
thank
to.
Gosh, I really needed that.
Yeah. Well, he did it to me in India all
Yeah,
the time. He did it to me all the time. So, her brother, by the way, somebody needs to write a biography of her and her brother. That one, and I haven't found that book. That would be a great thing to read.
Maybe you should write it.
so
No, I'm burning daylight. I cannot do that.
Oh,
That'll be somebody else.
so Bob,
And I don't know French. You have to know French to really be a good researcher of her, and I don't.
Susan?
I had a comment to make when you mentioned that that what you call it, the Jesus prayer anyway. You said, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Well, that is the Kyrie, like Kyrie eleison is
Yeah.
much like that too, which is the first, the very beginning of the Catholic Mass or the
There we
Mass.
go.
Right?
That's
And
right.
that's
Exactly.
Greek. That's actually in Greek. All the rest of the Mass has been in Latin, but so I don't know.
Good observation.
Sort of connection there.
Woo.
You're all going, what is she talking about?
Yeah, no.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Dear God, have mercy on me, because it's hard to be ready for worship. I mean, that's part of
You're
what
an astute musician, Susan. Yep.
So,
excellent, Bob. I agree.
so Bob, I had the flashback to being a high school student and reading Death of a Salesman. And in Arthur Miller's book, Willie Loman says attention must be paid.
Yes, boom. This is Willie Loman's widow at the grave, kneeling there on the dirt. She says, attention must be paid. Attention must be paid. Oh, beautiful. Excellent.
Circles just keep coming back, don't they?
So what's your commentary on our attention deficit disorder that's characterized current society?
I'll do this. Turn this thing off.
Okay.
Turn this thing off for an hour a day if you can. If you can't do that, turn it off for 15 minutes. No less than 15 minutes. Do not look at it. Don't look at a screen. To use Wendell Berry, the great poets, we need to be attending less to screens. And don't look at a computer. Don't look at a television. Don't look at a movie screen. Don't look at a tablet. Don't look at your phone. Don't look at your watch in case you want to cheat and see what messages you have. No, don't cheat. 15 minutes